Okay. Sorry for the late one here. I was actually watching the crypto markets and got me distracted onto the time because I was really looking at what was going on with some of these key movements that are happening tonight, which is Sunday for those who are watching this later. So let me first start by saying thanks for watching. It's episode 18 of our sneak peek for the week. Tonight, as always, we're going to talk about some really significant earnings that are coming up this week. I'm going to skip the economic indicators, although I love to talk about them and think they're really important. I'm really going to focus in on the big earnings because this is going to be a significant week as far as understanding how our economy is doing, sort of from a tech perspective, understanding what's happening within the markets, looking at the S&P earnings here. But I'm gonna actually start this live. I'm looking at pricing right now on my phone, and I didn't expect to be talking about this tonight, but as of this moment, it's 10:51 p.m. on the East Coast in the U.S. I'm looking at a current Bitcoin price of 38,365 and change. You heard that correct. If you haven't looked at pricing today, it's back up over 38,000. It's up over 12% today. Wild, just absolutely wild. There's some rumors this could be a short squeeze. We're seeing that it could be finally that we're breaking through some resistance. But frankly, I think what's probably the more key component here is we're looking at some technical levels being broken for the first time in a long time. So this is important because a lot of people are in crypto. A lot of people are trading it or holding it. And a lot of people are also shorting it. So if you're shorting and you're on leverage, this is a moment to be aware of. If this breaks further, this could be a big problem for you. So just some key info here as I'm looking at it. You know, it is trading above its 50-day moving average for the first time since May. Uh, that's significant. If you're into technical analysis and this is something you follow, this is obviously a big deal. I'm going to take a quick peek and see where Ether is at right now as well. Ethereum is currently at 2,310, kind of around that area. So that's obviously a big change. That's up over 7% today alone. Wow, this is a big deal. This is a lot of stuff moving around. And what this is a sign of some pretty major moves happening in the money front. Like I said, I'm going to get into the earnings in a second here, but Bitcoin at 38, Ethereum at 38,000 plus, Ethereum sitting about 2,300. These are big, big moves. So, you know, if you bought the dips, you're probably seeing some short-term gains here, which is great. Honestly, it's hard to say what is going to happen now for the week at this point. I think it's a good indicator that interest is back. I haven't seen the volume numbers as of yet, but I would imagine to see this kind of movement, something is cracking at an institutional level, but I'd want to confirm that before really committing to it. So that's just to start off with what I'm seeing right now. This is likely to see some significance tomorrow in the market because as these prices are moving up, the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, which is an over-the-counter trade right now, but you know they're talking about becoming an ETF. We could see a big pop in that in the morning if these prices stay steady. And of course, the reason for that is that was based on the last closing price on Friday. It obviously doesn't move over the weekend. We'll see what happens when it opens up Monday morning. If Bitcoin is cracking close to that 40K mark, you could see a nice little pop in GBTC in the morning. Excuse me. And then additionally, some of the miners, I'd be really curious to see what's going to happen there on the mining front. I won't name any of the names because I think everyone's in different positions. But if you're holding miners, I would almost imagine you would probably see somewhat of a spike in those in the morning. Again, it's not financial advice, but just sort of looking at it from my perspective in a macro, one would expect that they're obviously holding a considerable amount of coin. You'd expect to see that go up in the morning as well. So those are things I needed to call out right away as we got started here because, you know, obviously like those are humongous gains tonight that really are kind of unexpected. It's not that people don't think it could get back up again. It's just, you know, as you heard, since May, this has been the first time it's passed that 50-day moving average. So that's a really big deal. So, excuse me. Let's talk about the week real quick here. And sorry for the coughing. Allergies are terrible right now in my area, and as you can tell, it's crushing my lungs a bit. So here's the deal. Like we're talking some very significant earnings from the tech world this week. I'll go over all the names in a second, but when we think in terms of like who are the big names within the S&P that we're talking about here, we're talking about Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, and Alphabet are all going to be reporting second quarter results. And frankly, you know, it's been a pretty unbelievable reporting season so far from an earnings perspective. 24% of the companies in the S&P have reported second quarter results. Let's say this again. About a quarter of the companies in the S&P 500 have reported second quarter results. and 88% have topped earnings per share estimates. That is wild. That is wild. Um, Snap and Twitter had a huge week last week, so that sort of just is giving a little bit of a signal or indicator that we might see some more coming in big time here as well. Um, how sustainable they are, again, is going to depend on a lot of things: the overall economy, how we're recovering or continue to recover, if we see more shutdowns due to these different variants that we're hearing about now. But it's been significant to see 88% topping analyst estimates. These are S&P 500 stocks. These aren't mid caps or small caps where unexpected things happen. That's a sign of very strong growth. But to play the other side of the coin, maybe they were calling a little bit too low out of caution, and that could be a miss on that front as well. Just keep that in mind. I think what we're going to see, though, and again, I'm only saying this because it really isn't meant to be financial advice. It's really just my take on the macro of what we're seeing. But as more and more people are trying to get back to being open again, we're seeing more companies hiring. They're looking at getting more customers in their doors. I think the way that they're going after these customers is obviously with, excuse me, I'm very sorry about the coughing. What we're really seeing at scale is you have to advertise to these folks to make sure you're bringing them back into your establishment, your business. They're buying from you. So I would not be surprised to see strong earnings coming out of anyone who makes their money from advertising. Obviously, Google, Alphabet fall into that, Facebook fall into that, et cetera. So, that's a tone that I sort of expect to continue to see. And over the past couple of years, even as we've seen bad news come out about these folks going in front of Congress, the beatings that they're getting, then they still blow out their numbers. And I think that part of that really is the proof is in the pudding that it's very hard to lock down consumers' time, and it's even more to get their attention. So if these are places where we're seeing attention getting grabbed, I would honestly expect people to keep seeing these kind of earnings. Of course, you have to look at everything and understand the numbers, but if you think about it in terms of really you're starting a business, you're trying to grow, where are you going to go to get that massive level of attention? I mean, it's not a lot of options, right? It's a handful of companies own that play. So, I wouldn't be surprised by anything at this point. I think Apple is going to be significant. I'm not sure what's going to happen as far as all the chip shortages that we've been seeing. So that's one you would definitely want to pay attention to. Again, not to beat the horse here, but usually when I'm talking about earnings in general, what I'm really thinking about is long-term investors. Do you have risk in your portfolio? Do you hold these in mutual funds, index funds, and not realize the kind of exposure you have? I think when we're seeing below earnings like we are right now, I think what you're going to see is a lot more people trading. And so there could be a lot of big movements in price. I think that if we see big blowouts here from all these major names, I would not be surprised to see prices really, really move to the positive. I also think that anyone who's short could be in trouble here. So certainly hoping they're hedged against that. These are the kind of things to start thinking about. It's funny because, even if you think about like Amazon here, this is even more significant for them than it has been in the past. I mean, aside from Bezos going to the moon, attempting to go to the moon, but no, just joking, going up in space in his rocket with Blue Origin being pretty cool. On the flip side, this is also the first time Amazon's going to report earnings without him as the head of the company. So something to pay attention to. It'll be interesting to see the way they answer questions, report and respond, what they have to say as part of that earnings report, and really what impact, if any, Bezos being in charge has. I would imagine not much, but be interesting to see what happens there. The other thing I want to throw out there as well is this is going to be a significant week as far as a Federal Reserve, because we're going to see some decisions getting made here. Tuesday, we kick off the 2-day meeting around monetary policy decisions, and then there'll be a press conference that goes along with that. That'll take place Wednesday afternoon. So again, this is where we start to understand what kind of movements we're going to see from the Fed, buying and selling, rates, what the future holds. People really break down what comes out of these meetings, right down to the word, the way he says things. And it's because what Jerome Powell says can move the markets significant. So I always find that there's a lot of analysts who think they know what's going to happen, or they have a good opinion of what's going to happen coming out of the Fed, but they're wrong a lot. And I think what you need to do is if you're really trying to be in a place where you're trading or actively moving money around, I think you got to stay very close to this. If you're operating within futures or you're operating within currency or FX, as many people will call it, I think it's very important to understand that, if you're new to the currency markets, if you're new to holding currency or trading it or have someone in a portfolio, you need to look at what happens after the Fed speaks, because big changes can happen, and especially if you're leveraged, it can have a big impact on your portfolio or really on your holdings and the risk you carry you may not even be aware of. So with that, I think what we're trying to understand is, are we going to have more quantitative easing? What's going to happen on that front? And then again, we think we're going to see a relatively less impactful meeting than we have previously, because there was a lot of hawkish sort of rhetoric that came out of that. Now we'll see if this is on the same note, but excuse me, this will probably be a little bit more in line of what people are typically expecting from the Fed. So with that, let's just hit the earnings calendar real quick here, because I'm sure everyone's getting tired of hearing me cough tonight. I'm going to run through Monday through Friday this week, who's earning and when we're expecting it to happen during the day. So let's just kick it off. Monday morning, we have Lockheed Martin, LMT, which is going to be before the market. If you don't know Lockheed, it's like aerospace and defense company, very big name, massive company. So that's an important one, and definitely one that's worth looking at as well. Tesla will be after the market close. I, for one, am really interested in hearing Tesla's earnings. Aside from the fact that I want to understand how the cars are performing and how sales are going, we also want to get a feel for what's happened with Bitcoin. It's sort of ironic that we're seeing this huge bump in Bitcoin like the night before we're going to hear about Tesla's earnings, which are going to be heavily impacted by those Bitcoin holdings as well. We also know that, excuse me, SpaceX also holds Bitcoin in its sheet. So interesting timing. Not saying there's anything to do with it or that they're connected in any way here, but a 12% bump the night before would look real good in our earnings report, just to say, well, it was down, but we're going back up again. On Tuesday, we have Centene, CNC, UPS, symbols UPS, 3M, which is MMM, as you can imagine, SiriusXM Holdings, SIRI, Sherwin-Williams, SHW, General Electric, GE, Stanley Black & Decker, SWK, Polaris, PII, Waste Management, WM, Boston Scientific, BSX, JetBlue, JBLU, Fiserv, FISV, Raytheon Technologies, RTX, Invesco, IVZ like Zebra, Lamb Weston Holdings, LW, and those are all before the market opens on Tuesday. It gets pretty crazy on Tuesday after the market closes, so this is the one you want to pay attention to if you're watching right now. Excuse me. Apple, AAPL, Starbucks, SBUX, Advanced Micro Devices, better known as AMD, Alphabet under the symbol GOOGL, Teladoc Health, TDOC, Visa, symbols V, Microsoft, MSFT, Mondelez, MDLZ, Juniper Networks, JNPR, and to finish it out with something to eat, the Cheesecake Factory, which is CAKE Cake. Those are all hitting after the market. So I know for one, I will 100% be really paying attention here and probably making a decision as to whose earnings I'm going to be listening to live. But we've got, Apple, AMD, Google, Starbucks, Microsoft, Visa. I mean, there's a lot of things in here to be looking at that are going to also give good signals or indicators as to what else is happening in the broader market, right? If Google is crushing it on, on advertising, if Starbucks is seeing same-store sales get back to where they were or better, even Cheesecake Factory, be curious to see what kind of numbers they've seen in the second quarter, if they're starting to see feet come back in the door, if folks are eating it at tables or they're still doing heavy on takeout. A lot of really good information as far as not just earnings, but what we can learn from those earnings and try to extrapolate them against the market. Excuse me. On Wednesday, we have Humana, HUM, CME Group, CME, Pfizer, PFE, McDonald's, MCD, Six Flags Entertainment, SIX, like six, Boeing, BA, Moody's, MCO, General Dynamics, GD, Teledyne Technologies, TDY, Bristol Myers Squibb, BMY. That's all before the market opens. And then after the market, got some big ones here again. Facebook, FB, Ford, F, Xilinx, ZLNX, PayPal, PYPL, ServiceNow, NOW, Lam Research Corp, LRCX, Align Technology, ALGN are all after the market. I don't really talk about how I connect these dots, but I'm going to take a pause here and share something. Like when I know that Google's reporting, and then a couple hours, it feels like, but a couple days later, Facebook's reporting, I see a lot of correlation between that. And I start to think about how their earnings have looked in the past. I'm going to go back and look at those. Are they often in line with each other? Does one tend to do better than the other? If one's up, is the other down? And how those stocks moved? This is where you get almost a sneak peek into Facebook. If Google's advertising is through the roof, I sort of personally take the thought process of like, well, I wonder how Facebook is. If I'm advertising on Google, I'm probably also advertising on Facebook. Maybe, maybe not. But we know with Twitter and Snap, they were really big earnings because of advertising. So again, we're extrapolating, right? We also know that earlier in the week, Lockheed Martin is reporting, while General Dynamics is reporting on Wednesday. Very similar business, aero and defense. That's how I start to think about what am I learning from one thing to the next and how it carries over. So I would really urge you, when you're looking at earnings, when can you get your sneak peek of what is possibly likely to happen? And again, separate companies, separate go-to-markets, everything's different, but advertising is advertising. Defense is defense. Restaurants are restaurants, right? It doesn't mean they have to be exact. It doesn't mean the numbers have to match. What it means is, are more people advertising in the digital media, social media space? Yes, that's probably good for everybody. Doesn't mean that it definitely is, but it's an indicator or a signal at a minimum. If we see lots of people walking into restaurants, well, maybe they're walking to lots of other restaurants as well. And this is where we start to build that momentum, build that idea, see if there's a trade that we can get in on, etc. Let's keep moving. On Thursday, we have Merck, MRK, Intercontinental Exchange, ICE, T. Rowe Price, TROW, Comcast, CMCSA, Spirit Airlines, SAVE, Valero Energy, VLO, Hilton Worldwide, HLT, Carlyle Group, CG. I want to take a pause for a second. Carlyle is a big private equity buyout firm. So it'll be interesting to see what we're hearing from them just as far as activity in that market, the growth of companies, if there's any acceleration of M&A, et cetera, who's going public or how they see making more money in the next few quarters here. Sometimes that that ability to look at how they're buying and pulling all these companies together is a good indicator of the success they're having in a micro that builds up into that macro view. MasterCard also, MA. Again, we know Visa is going to be happening before MasterCard. This is that correlation I'm looking for, historical, and then building my idea of what's going to happen in real time between those two. Molson Coors, and MasterCard is MA, by the way. Molson Coors, TAP. Keurig Dr. Pepper, KDP. Yum Brands, YUM. PG&E is PCG. Citrix, CTXS. The S&P Global Inc., SPGI, all before the market opens. And then really one of the biggest ones I'm looking for this week is going to be Amazon, AMZN, Overstock, OSTK, Albertsons, ACI, Altria, MO, T-Mobile, TMUS, excuse me, World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, Twilio, TWLO, Pinterest, PINS, Mohawk Industries, MHK, Upwork, UPWK, Skyworks Solutions, SWKS, United States Steel, X, and Gilead Sciences, GILD. I know I already said it. I'm going to say it again. We're going to get a look now at, Pinterest. And again, same kind of feel. What's happening with Pinterest? I'm going to be really curious to see if this is going to be the same kind of play that we saw in the earlier online social media advertising and how we can play that as well. And that's pins at PINS, by the way, again. And on Friday, we have Caterpillar, CAT, VF Corp, VFC, ExxonMobil, XOM, Chevron, CVX, Danimer Scientific, DNMR, Procter & Gamble, PG, AbbVie, ABBV, and Charter Communications, all before the market open. So when I say this is a big week, it's not an exaggeration. This is a big week. This is the kind of week where your entire year can start to be really built out as far as momentum, the signals we're seeing, the plays we can take advantage of. I know that I don't get into these on these calls or these sort of weekly updates, but at the halfway point in the year, we now can sort of start to see if there's momentum, if we're going in a certain direction. Advertising strong yet again across the board. People are putting butts into chairs within restaurants. We can look at everything now from both an industry, a sort of a sub-industry perspective, where we're winning, where we're losing, how people are starting to spend money. It starts to form the cloud around it. So when you hear people talk about different ways of investing and trading, understanding correlations, strategies between the two, how you can take it from a macro perspective down to a stock symbol perspective, this is how you learn to do it. You look at earnings, you understand what's coming in, what's not, how people are performing. But something we don't talk about enough, and maybe I'll start talking about this more, is how do we understand the correlation and then the impact post earnings of similar companies in the same sector, subsector, et cetera. Like Snap and Twitter are doing great. If we hear good news from Facebook and we hear good news, from Alphabet, I'm going to go and do some research on pins on Pinterest and see how they performed when they've all performed well. Maybe I can get in front of a trade there, or maybe I can make a good investment for myself. The other way to think about this too, there's some other channels that I watch on here that are great, and there's smaller channels that you probably don't get a lot of attention from or don't see popping up in review, but there's some really great breakdowns of how to like look at and hedge using options, using a small amount of money to make a big play before earnings, etc. The beauty of that is, of course, is there's a learning curve to make sure you do it right, but there's a good reason to do it, and sometimes it's because you can get a really big pop after an earnings event. Now, correspondingly, in the FX markets, on the macro markets, this is where those economic events like the Fed's meetings, that is super important. Understanding what's going to come from it, who's going to be talking, what those numbers mean. You take the same approach there as well. But what I will say is this: many people have been burned terribly and blown up accounts because they went with something all in before earnings, and it went against them. And what we hear all the time, especially on YouTube, is, hey, here's how I made $1 million on one trade because I knew earnings were going to be great. Cool. But there's a wake of people who have lost all their money doing it the wrong way. If you're going to play earnings, especially big names that can pop, make sure you understand how to hedge against that trade if you're making it. Make sure you understand that there's potential for risk. Make sure you understand how to alleviate that risk in your portfolio. So with that, good luck this week. Really start paying attention. I hope last week, per our last video, you took the time to listen to some of these analyst reports. You listened to some of the earnings calls. But either way, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate it. Hope you have a great week, good earnings, and you're just out there crushing it. Please let me know if you have any questions or any other topics you want to go deeper into. I'd love to do so. And with that, have a good night. Thanks so much, everybody.